I'm having a conversation with Norm Gray with W. Norman Gray Consulting out of Ontario, Canada. I've had opportunity to speak with Norm over the years with respect to a number of topics, but mentorship is an area that I know he's had a lot of experience with. Norm, thanks for joining us in this conversation.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure, Jim.
Norm, I wonder if you could maybe just, for the benefit of our audience, give us a little bit of your background. Where have you been? What have you seen?
Well, my background, I'll be as brief as possible. I had a career in banking, and there was a lot of consulting work in banking, management consulting, because when you're an account manager, commercial banking, you're not just selling loans, you're also working with companies. And so I guess that's where I gained a lot of my experience, was in credit risk, non-credit risk, investment products, HR, marketing. And when I retired as general manager, regional operations in Ontario. After I retired, I went to work for the Canadian Youth Business Foundation, which was a national charity that had been formed by the CIBC and the Royal Bank in 1996. And with that program, we provided startup loans at reasonable cost to the entrepreneurs. But one of the conditions is that they would get a mentor from the business community that would work with them for the first 2 years of their loan. The mentors would typically be people from the business community that we had recruited, would be volunteer. We used to say 4 or 5 hours a month. So my role was to recruit and to match mentors. As a matter of fact, the program grew significantly, that when I retired from that in May 2 years ago, I had 5 managers reporting to me, plus a mentor in residence, where we did the recruiting and the matching and the follow-up with the entrepreneurs.
Well, it seems like you've had a terrific background in finance as well as this aspect of mentoring, and that's where I'd really like to focus in on. I was hoping that you could maybe talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen in mentorship. And specifically, I've got a couple of questions I wouldn't mind running past you and getting your responses to that. Norm, from your experience, what value is gained by entrepreneurs who participate in a mentoring relationship?
Well, there are many benefits for entrepreneurs in mentoring. I think some of the benefits of mentoring is seeing the young entrepreneurs succeed. They develop their potential and their skills in their business. They develop their personal growth through coaching, communication, and active listening. And they contribute to the regional development and economic growth in Canada. And to drill down a little bit, I would say the value gained by entrepreneurs is hopefully they don't make the same mistakes as what someone who has been before them, done maybe similar work, or who has been in the business community, and they would grow in their business. Let me back up a minute. We were modeled after the Prince's Trust in England, and when they started some 55 years ago or thereabouts, they did not have a mentoring component. And the success of the entrepreneurs was close to 45% in the first 5 years. When they introduced the mentoring component, it quickly escalated to 75% success rate. And I believe Stats can, although I haven't seen figures recently, but I think some of their figures, they might be a little different from the standpoint of time frames, but I believe they would be somewhat similar. That there's definitely a huge success rate from if they're matched with the right mentor, and if they are willing to work with the mentor, and the mentor work with them.
That's a fantastic statistic there that you were talking about, just the improvement that is seen in the outcomes when a mentoring program is involved.
We used to feel there was a huge value, and so much value that even people who didn't get a loan from us wanted to participate in the mentor component of it.
Now, your experience in the specific program that you're referring to was with young entrepreneurs. Do you feel that the same types of results and advantages can be seen in other age groups as well?
Yes, for sure, because we're always in a learning mode, we're always in a development mode and a growing mode, and there are mentoring programs that do focus on people who are in business that want help or that want a mentor, whether it be informal or formal. I can think of a couple of groups that are doing that right now. It may not be as formalized, but they do nevertheless have some kind of a mentoring program. So yes, to answer your question, I think there's a definite benefit regardless of age group.
Thanks for those comments. The next question I'd like to ask you is along these lines. Is there an advantage or disadvantage that you see in having a formalized mentorship program or an informal mentoring? And how or when might one model be superior or better than the other?
When you have a formalized mentorship program or an informal mentoring program, they're really two different things. They're going to have two different objectives and two different structures. Let's talk about the formalized mentorship program first. If it's formal, you're going to have a connection to the strategic business objective of their organization. In other words, if it's formal, they're going to say, what are your strategies, and then what are your tactics to accomplish those strategies? So there would be established goals. There would be measurable outcomes in a formalized program. I think the big thing with a formalized one is there would be a formalized process of pairing the mentor with the mentee. And as you know, at CYBF, which is now Futurepreneur Canada, there was a formalized process. First of all, the intake of the mentors. They were recruited. They went through a qualifying interview. They signed a mentor agreement with the organization concerning conflict of interest and various things like that. And then when the matching took place, I'm probably getting into a future discussion here that you're going to have, but when the matching took place, it was done again on a formalized basis. We took a look at what did the mentor have to offer. They had registered on our system. We had their resume, or we had their strengths that they brought to the table. And so we would say, can we match this to what the entrepreneur requires? And so it would get fairly strategic in that sense. And then they would have an introductory meeting to meet, to see if the synergy was right, to see if they would be able to work together. They looked at a mentoring agreement between themselves where they outlined their roles and responsibilities, what each one would be bringing to the table in the mentoring process. They would even determine, how often they would meet, the location, the time, that sort of thing. They would discuss what the relationship goals would be and what they hope to have in the way of outcomes. So that agreement would be generated on the system, and then they would each get a copy of it. And the mentoring engagement in a formal process normally lasts, usually in business, 9 to 12 months, but in our case it lasted 2 years. Regardless of the time frame, there needs to have a beginning and an end. And then I think, too, the mentor in a formalized program gets some kind of training. And I know that Futurepreneur Canada has come up with programs just about the time I was leaving 2 years ago, training programs for mentors and that kind of thing, and support for the mentors. So those are some of the benefits of a formalized program. Now, if you go to an informal program, informal mentoring, there are benefits to that, but it's for a different audience, perhaps. So, for example, it might be you might have an informal program in the workplace where a large company, or it doesn't have to be large, they establish a mentor for everybody that comes in on their intake program. And so things like there wouldn't be necessarily specified goals. The outcomes would maybe be unknown. There would probably be limited access to a formalized aspect. And there might be self-selection between the mentor and the mentee with no necessarily guideline to ensure or to determine how they should be matched. It could turn out to be long-term mentoring or very, very short-term. There wouldn't really be any training or support provided, and there might be indirect organizational benefits. So where in the formalized program you had mentor training, ideally with different modules where the mentor would go through and would be very effective in the way of professional development. And the informal side, there wouldn't be the training. They would just be learning from their experience. So that, I think, is the difference between the two types of programs. I'm being very general, of course. When might one model be better than the other? I think it depends on the situation. In the case of Futurepreneur Canada, I think the formalized program was very important to have the benefits that were needed. Whereas I know of other organizations that have informal ones, and they do a self-selection, sort of like speed dating at a networking event, where they would select who they want to work with for a period of a couple of months. And then in the case of one organization, they could make a pitch for their business, and that would be fine because they all understood what that was going to be. Whereas, as you know, in a formalized program, certainly at CYBF, now Futurepreneur Canada, the mentor could not take part in the entrepreneur's business. We felt there was a conflict of interest in that case. So I guess to recap, I think there's benefits to a formalized program, there's benefits to an informal program, and I think each have their place. It's going to depend on what you want the outcomes to be, what you want the strategic intent to be, and so on.
Well, that's a great comparison between the two different approaches. And I think I would tend to agree with you, Norm, that there is a place for both of them, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think there's great opportunity to explore the potential for each of those approaches in various environments, workplace, in the community with young entrepreneurs, as well as those who have been around for a while too. The matching process, what we're really talking about here, I think, is in mentorship, it's a relationship that builds over a period of time. And not always is it a smooth and without some measure of challenge or potential conflict. So I'm just wondering, is the matching process important to the success of a mentoring relationship? And if so, how can the matching process be improved? I know you've touched a little bit on that already.
Well, that's a good question, Jim. Let me give two examples. I know of one organization, a Chamber of Commerce in Canada, who they have a mentoring program. And it's a very small program, and it is done with hands-on. So let's say the manager of the mentoring role at the Chamber, they would ask for volunteer mentors. They would give them interviews. They would have them register on their system. And then when the entrepreneur or the mentee comes forward, they would interview them and get a really detailed look at what they're looking for in a mentor. And then they would go to their database. They would pick out the one. They would facilitate the introductory meeting. It might last an hour, where they would, the manager of mentoring would ask each one what they're hoping to get out of it, what their roles and responsibilities will be, what disciplines they're going to bring to the table, and so on. And then, if they agreed to work, they would go ahead and work. But then when they met monthly, the manager mentoring would be present facilitating the discussion of the mentoring. And it was a very successful program, I understand, but also very labor-intensive. And it probably limited the free flow of information somewhat between the mentor and the mentee. The matching process is important, and at CYBF, ideally, if you had, and one of the reasons we had several, I mentioned 4 or 5 managers across Canada, when you're recruiting mentors at networking events and so on, you get to know that person. You set up the qualifying interview over the phone. You have them register on the system. And and you really probably know that person somewhat. You might not. And then when the entrepreneur is selected, you determine what skills do they require. There's a half a dozen skills that you're looking at that they require, and then you see how this would match up with your database of mentors. And then you start making phone calls to the mentors, to the mentor, to see if they would be willing to mentor this person. You give them a thumbnail sketch of their business, and then they meet and have their introductory meeting, and then they're matched. Now that, I think, the matching process is important. It helps in the success of a mentoring relationship. How can it be improved? I guess the more time you put into the matching process, the more likely the positive outcome will be.
Okay, well, thank you so much for those comments, Norm, about all of these aspects that we've touched on mentoring. And I'm just wondering, I know just as we kind of close the conversation here, you've had a great number of experiences over the years in this particular program and with mentoring entrepreneurs. Is there any story that stands out about the impact that mentorship can have on an individual?
Yes, I can think of one situation. A person was involved in manufacturing a product from a developing country and selling it in Canada, and they wanted to be sure that people got paid a good wage in that particular country. And so they had volunteered in that country, and before setting up their business, they set up their business and started to get it going and needed distribution sources for the product and so on. We matched the person with a mentor who had been involved in a similar product that was being manufactured, actually had been marketing manager of a major Canadian concern. And so by matching him with that person, he was able to get firsthand some of the pitfalls in your marketing strategy, in approaching various retail outlets and that kind of thing. Now, the mentor probably went a little beyond what was required because, well, first of all, they arranged for them to go to a trade show with their product, and the mentor went with them. The mentor was able to open some doors and recommend that call on certain companies and that kind of thing. But this company turned out to be a real success, and it wasn't just because the mentor had opened doors or whatever. It was a combination of things, but the main one being the mentor had a good understanding of what the individual required. And the individual required someone who had some marketing expertise, someone who had some good business sense as it relates to providing a product to distributors and so on. But from my experience, certainly the mentoring component of a relationship was absolutely amazing.
Well, it sounds like the mentee in that particular relationship really benefited from the experience. I'm just wondering, you've again had such a tremendous amount of input with respect to mentorship in Canada through this particular program. If someone was thinking of becoming involved, either as a mentor or as a mentee to get the benefit of mentorship, what would you say, Norm, to maybe just encourage them?
If a mentor wanted to get involved, I would encourage them to go on the internet and see what organizations. There's a number of organizations that provide mentorship programs. There's a new program, I believe, in Ontario that started a year ago that involves mentors. And so if people would like to volunteer, there's lots of opportunity for them to do that. I would just encourage them to go on the website or go to some networking events of Chamber of Commerce events or whatever, and let it be known you want to volunteer your time as a mentor, and I'm sure the doors would open quickly. For someone seeking a mentor, I would advise them to do the same thing. Go on the internet and see what programs are available. I know you have comparable organizations out west, but in Ontario we have the Small Business Enterprise Centres, which are sponsored jointly by the provincial government and the local municipality. So each one can be a little different, but for example, in certain parts of Ontario, the Small Business Enterprise Centre, they may have a mentoring program, or if they don't, they will certainly be able to direct the person to obtain a mentor and so on. There are various groups, even if someone has a business going and they want to have some help. There are organizations out there where you can cost a nominal fee to get 3 hours of expert advice from 2 or 3 mentors that belong to that group. It's most of them are non-for-profit, and get some advice and benefit to help their business grow or take a different direction or whatever.
Well, Norman Gray, Norman Gray Consulting, Ontario, Canada, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and telling us some of the things to watch for with respect to mentorship, and for sharing some of your experiences today. Thanks, Norm.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found that helpful. To access additional free information on business and mentorship topics, use the links on our website, pvs4u.ca. For all of our social media channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and our YouTube channel. And feel free to share this information with those in your circle of contacts where they could benefit. For Provision Solutions, Inc., I'm Jim Ewing, wishing you the best of success.